By the dawn of the early 20th century, American culture splintered under the weight of rapid industrialization and global conflict. In literature, this fracture manifested as high modernism. Writers sought to accurately reflect a broken world. To do this, leading modernists discarded classical meters and strict rhyming patterns, adopting free verse to capture the chaotic rhythms of modern life. T.S. Eliot typified this structural rebellion, building sprawling, fragmented epics that broke from literary tradition. Yet, publishing in the exact same magazines alongside Eliot was Edwin Arlington Robinson. Robinson rejected free verse. He restricted his thoughts to the rigid 14-line framework of the Petrarchan sonnet. His insistence on strict meter and rhyme led some peers to dismiss him as a Victorian relic, but a close examination of his craft reveals a different reality. Robinson modernized the sonnet by exploiting its rigid boundaries, using the classical structure to force highly compressed, psychologically realistic narratives. To fit a complex narrative into 14 lines, Robinson eliminated explicit exposition and background prose. He replaced these missing details with metonymy, carefully selecting words that carry layered, associative meanings. These metonymic choices allowed him to communicate psychological trauma without stating it directly to the reader. His sonnet, Reuben Bright, focuses on a butcher who tears down his slaughterhouse following the death of his wife. The text isolates 3 specific words describing the butcher's actions: packed, chest, and chopped up. On the surface, these describe the literal realities of the meatpacking trade, but underneath, packed and chest suggest a heavy human heart, pointing to emotional devastation. The term chopped up evokes the reality of butchery he can no longer perform, suggesting complicity. By layering these associations at the lexical level, Robinson forces the reader to actively decipher the character's unstated, tragic motivations. This intense compression at the word level was dictated by the constraints of the poem's macrostructure. This diagram illustrates the rigid layout of the classical Petrarchan sonnet. The 14 lines are strictly divided into 2 distinct narrative containers, an 8-line octave and a 6-line sestet. Robinson consistently used the opening octave to establish a specific situation, present a psychological state, or set up a mystery. In the poem Cliff Klingenhagen, the octave introduces a scenario. A host drinks bitter wormwood while serving his guest wine. Between the 8th and 9th lines lies the volta. This physical chasm acts as a drastic pivot, forcing an immediate change in direction. The sestet delivers a sharp reversal or ambiguous resolution, forcing a reinterpretation of the setup. The sestet of Cliff Klingenhagen reveals that the host who drank the wormwood is amazingly happy, but he smilingly refuses to explain why, leaving the underlying truth entirely up to the reader. The strict 14-line boundary physically prevented Robinson from rambling toward an easy conclusion. The Petrarchan structure acted as a compression engine, forcing his psychological case studies to reach sharp, highly dramatic endings. Robinson knew how these mechanics functioned, outlining his philosophy in a 1927 poem titled Sonnet. The poem operates on a central duplexity, framing the relationship between poet and sonnet form as a slave and master. This overlay tracks the exact phonetics of the opening lines. Notice how the a phoneme of master and the a phoneme of slave align with their respective rhyming pairs on the page. These phonetic tracks physically bind the opposing concepts together, mirroring the meticulous, repetitive manual labor required to write within formal constraints. His obsessive attention to structural details extended beyond the first draft, as seen in a revision made to this poem. In the 1927 version, he altered a single vowel, replacing workshop with workship. Workshop refers to a physical place of manual labor, while workship is a rare noun denoting the abstract concept of craftsmanship. By changing one vowel, the metaphor shifts away from a physical object to the pure architecture of thought. This precision allowed him to engage in a direct dialogue with 19th-century masters like John Keats and Dante Gabriel Rossetti. Through structural mechanics and precise revisions, Robinson reimagined the sonnet as a space for rigorous intellectual encounter. This approach to structure enabled a subversion of the sonnet's traditional themes. Historically, the 14-line form was reserved almost exclusively for aristocratic romance and the musings of high society. Robinson pivoted away from these tropes, aiming his lens at homely American subjects and the marginalized figures of modern society. He populated his verse with aging clerks, lonely outcasts, and suicidal mill workers, characters foreign to late Victorian American poetry. By applying classical structures to the struggles of ordinary people, he repurposed an elitist poetic structure to grant profound dignity to the forgotten and the broken. This architectural legacy shaped the trajectory of 20th century American poetry. His closest successor in both style and temperament was Robert Frost. This lineage web illustrates Frost adopting Robinson's blueprint, utilizing inherited meters to depict grim, rural subjects. Frost's masterpiece design relies on the structural symmetries and dark psychological pacing that Robinson developed decades earlier. This influence extended deeply into the works of other major successors, including Edna St. Vincent Millay, who further evolved the American sonnet. Robinson proved that traditional forms and strict meters were not the enemies of modernism. Robinson's modernization of the Petrarchan structure established the American narrative sonnet, bridging classical rigor with psychological realism.